With us now is Father Shenan Boquet, and he is president of the diocese, a priest of the Diocese of Huma Thibodeau in Louisiana. He's also the president of Human Life International, and he's traveled more than 1,000,000 miles and visited 87 countries. And Human Life International's global mission to spread the teaching on faith and life and family and bring an end to abortion and bring an end to these attacks on human dignity. Father Bouquet, thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you, Father. Great to be with you and your audience once again.
You know, one of the things that's becoming very obvious in the world is that there is a tendency not to bend, even in principle, because we say, well, even if we disagree in this, we have agreement on many other things. And of course, one of the things was this issue that's been dealt with in many different kind of periodicals, the question of popular podcaster Dave Rubin, and you wrote a whole article on this.
Yeah, it was the issue of surrogacy, and I think it's something that maybe our audience may or may not be familiar with. But it was talking about the showing a picture of a child that's been conceived that he and his partner now are going to be welcoming into their relationship, and by partner he's in a same-sex relationship, and so. It obviously we know that two men, as two women, cannot conceive a child of their own. And so the means through in vitro fertilization and the various medical techniques today, we see where children are being treated, as a commodity, as something, an entitlement, that we can actually now create outside of the natural way in which God intended children to be welcomed and nurtured, and so it really kind of sparked a conversation when I read about it and heard about it, and it made me also think about what is this showing in the global market, and so obviously the issue that we've seen with Ukraine brought up that subject as well, and so that's kind of how I developed the article.
Well, it is rather interesting because, as I said, there are some people, and this is what caught my eye, there are certain people that are, for lack of a better word, socially conservative in their views in the culture, and yet they're extolling and very happy for this man and his significant other, thinking as if it's a wonderful thing for two homosexual men to raise a child. And neither of those men might not even be the donor for half of the conception. That might not even
Correct.
be the case. And
Correct.
so, go ahead.
Yeah, and what I was going to say, I did a little podcast the other day on this as well, and and I think what's for always this conversation is when we look at the issue of couples, married couples, husband, wife, who are struggling with infertility, and how do they deal with this? And of course, the church gives great guidance and great pastoral care and provides moral principles, and we have ways in which we can morally help a couple maybe to achieve in the conception of a child, through the conjugal act. And then you have the other situation where now, because of in vitro fertilization, we have this whole movement now where, we can, go outside of that natural environment, outside of what God intended between husband and wife, to now to bring a child into this world. And, and you're right, Father, when you think about under many other circumstances, conservative audiences would be, hold their ground on the issue of abortion. They hold the ground on the issue of euthanasia. They hold their ground even on the same-sex union. But then all of a sudden when it comes to this, we begin to look at a child as if a child were something that one has a right to, an entitlement to. And in the fact that it is, that's not the case. And
well,
I think,
it's interesting, Father, because an argument I heard from somebody, and I thought it was a rather strange argument, but I want to throw it out. He says, well, listen,
sure.
The Catholic Church, has the principle of totality where you can give somebody a kidney or you can give somebody, after they're dead, you can donate an organ. How is this different than organ donation?
Right. Yeah, and I've heard this many times, and I'm not sure we're going to have enough time to walk through it, but there is something very distinctively different about this. But again, I want to just, if we focus in primarily, on the gift of husband and wife to each other, and the very fact of what the conjugal act is and what conjugal love is, and how the very fact that a child, has a right to be brought up and conceived by their own biological parents, to be nurtured in the womb of their own mother, and to be welcomed into this world, birthed into this world by their own mother, raised by their own parents. So when we consider, how we approach this, we can see how these offenses can happen, with the issue of surrogacy, and that you mentioned. I mean, like with the first case we brought up, and the idea that both men may not even be the donor of the sperm that actually is used in that process of in vitro fertilization. They might not even know who the mother of the child is, because she herself could be an anonymous donor. And I've seen cases where even family members have donated sperm or an egg to help in the conception. I've seen so many scenarios occur. And as we're seeing in Ukraine, where it's one of the countries that actually legalizes, or where surrogacy is legal, and we're talking about an entire industry that's built around the commercialization of a child. And
now,
so what do we
Father,
have?
Is that industry kind of below the government level, or is this, in other words, is it kind of an illegal industry that's going on, or is it something the government supports?
It's a legal industry. It's legal in Ukraine. Yeah, and that's why, some of when you hear the stories that are out there, where some of these women are now having to go back to Ukraine to give birth, because if they give birth in another country where surrogacy is illegal, it would be considered human trafficking. So so these stories have many layers to them. And as a result, of course, the media picks up and tries to make the story about these poor couples in the United States and other parts of the world, who are waiting for their children, like they're waiting for a delivery from Amazon.
Yeah.
It's sad to realization that these women are exploited in many cases. They come from poor situations. They're trying to find a means to support their own family. And when you're talking about $11,000 to $15,000, $20,000 that is given to you to carry this child and then give this child up after you've given birth, the exploitation of these women, and then again, just the child. The child then is separated from its own mother that has welcomed and nourished. And so there's so many things, Father, to this that it should make each of us cringe. And and that had someone you're talking about the organ donation analogy, but it made me think of another comment I heard from someone the other day. Said, "Well, aren't we for children? Aren't we for having children? Aren't we pro-life? Don't we want to have children conceived?" And the answer, yes, we are pro-life. Yes, we do want to have children welcomed into this world. And however, the means by which we welcome children into this world is very different. And even though we know, and I think it's important for our audience to hear me say this, is that no matter how a child is conceived in this world, that child has inherent dignity and of equal value and must be treated with the utmost of respect. So, even as we talk about these things, I don't want to give any impression that any child conceived in these manners is of lesser dignity. No, they're not. They're of beauty and wonder and awe and must be treated as so and respected as human persons. But at the same time, a child has rights too. And we're forgetting that the child has a right, to be engendered by their own parents, and as I mentioned earlier, welcomed and nurtured and loved and educated and formed and throughout their life. And so now you have children that don't even know their own, maybe even know their own biological parents. This gets so complicated, Father. It really, as the article did, and it's also upsetting when you write about it.
Yes,
at least it upsets me.
We're speaking with Father Shenan Boquet about the whole question of surrogacy and how the country of Ukraine is one of the biggest purveyors of this surrogacy movement. Father, one of the things we haven't talked about, and this is something that they don't talk about, they talk about birth simply on a physiological, biological level.
Right.
But what we don't recognize, and every mother who has ever given birth to a child knows this, there is a supernatural, spiritual, grace-filled bond that the mother has. And the mother suffers it, and the child suffers from it if that's broken. And this is
Right.
something that therapists, they don't know. They say, well, why is that? Well, why is this child? He's come from a wonderful home, all this kind of stuff, healthy and all, but he has these, difficulties with his psychology, which to me is another way of the spirituality of the bond, which is being severed. Because either A, they don't think it's real, or B, they don't care.
Right, and we think about even for mothers, who freely and with full consent, because they can't raise their own child, will give their child up for adoption, and that love, that care remains a lifetime. And then for the child, as we know from many stories, who are adopted by loving parents and they're and given an opportunity that they may not have had with their own mother and father for whatever reason, but they want to know, what about my mom? Did they love me? Did they care for me? All those questions are always there. And here we're talking about something that was a good thing being done by this child's mother. She couldn't raise, but she welcomed, she nurtured, she gave birth, and she recognized someone else needs to raise this child. I can't. And so, and you saw the same thing in Ukraine when you hear some of the stories, where the mothers now, under contract, this is a binding legal contract, now have to give this child up. And let's just say that she happens to be the actual donor of the egg. So she is the biological mother. Now you're asking this mother to give up her child. And you hear many women will say it's very, very difficult, because now that they've nurtured and loved this child and welcomed this child and been up all night carrying this child and all the difficulties. So that this is I always love to say is if we follow what our Lord has given and we follow the beauty and nature of what God is intended, then we would not be in all these circumstances. We would be not in these moments, and these hardships and difficulties that we often struggle with obviously are the result of our rejection of God's laws and God's intention, and here, again, what is God's intent for husband and wife? What is God's intent for the welcoming of a child? Where is the place which God has given for children to be reared and loved under all the normal circumstances? And of course, as we just said, there could be circumstances where a family or mother cannot raise her child for whatever reason, but she gives the child up for adoption. That's a good thing.
Yes, it is.
That's still respecting life. It's a great thing. It's a heroic thing, and it's also heroic for couples to receive and adopt a child. So, but under the normal circumstance, how does God wish that child to be raised? By its own beautiful parents. And so we've introduced so many things, and I love when John Paul talks about this in Evangelium Vitae, and of course in the Church's teaching in Donum Vitae, and many other documents that talk about these issues, that it always comes back that I could be married, and my wife and I would love to have children. We're open to human life. We want to welcome, but we have a cross of infertility. Does that give me the right then to do things that are not morally correct in order to, quote, conceive? The answer would be no.
Father Boquet, I have to interrupt you. We're out of time. But thank you so much for sharing with us today. Time flies when we're talking about important things. Where can people go to find out more from Human Life International about this issue of surrogacy and the other things that your group deals with?
If they come to our website, www.hli.org, and look up My Spirit in Life and many of our resources, they'll be able to find out some more answers to their questions.
Well, we'll put that up on our show notes at sacredheartradio.com. Father Boquet, it's always a pleasure talking with you.
Same here, Father. Take care of yourself. God bless.